Hello, Jenny. Can you hear me?
Sorry, I
Jenny,
think I was mute then. Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah. I'm just looking for your colleagues before I admit. I found Neil. Before I admit half the village.
Having to register caught me out. I was just thinking I could click on the link.
No. No, I'm not going to make things that straightforward. Neil, can you hear me? I'm just asking Neil to unmute. Hello, Neil, and
Craig's the architect in the back.
Hello, how are you?
Hi. Sorry, what's the chap's name?
Craig Bamberdaff.
Greg. Hello, Greg.
Craig. Sorry, Craig.
Craig, I'm so sorry, Craig.
That's fine. I quite like Craig actually, but no, Craig's good though.
I just want to bear with me a second. Somebody's ringing my phone. I don't know why they will be when I'm supposed to be in a meeting. Hello, Barry O'Leary. Roy, I'm trying to start this meeting. I'm just about to let people in. If you've got a problem. No, I won't let you in until I let you in because I'm going to make sure the owners are here first and then I'll admit everybody. You're all in a waiting room. So if you wait and give me a minute, I will then let you all in. I just want to make sure everything's done, okay? So yours, thank you. Okay, sorry. Is there somebody else? Is Ross coming, or is it just you guys?
John from Keynote's joining us, and Ross will be dialing in, but he's in Spain. He's on travelling to Spain, so he might be a few minutes. So just start the meeting, Barry, and we'll go. He's
all right.
On at the minute.
What I'm going to do, I need to understand how I can give you guys permission to share screen because it's your presentation, not mine. Yeah. I'm going to give, just so I explain to you guys. I envisage just taking 45 minutes, which is what we did the first meeting at max.
The presentation will take no more than 5 minutes, Barry. Honestly, just to give a bit of context.
So what I want to do is give you 5 to 10 minutes of chalk and talk, and then open it to questions rather than either way. So I'm going to let everybody in now, and then who's got?
Give me the permission for the presentation, Barry. I've got it on my screen,
okay.
so I can.
I got to figure out how to do that. So let me just let everybody in because everybody's now decided to ring me. And I'll work that out. Okay, bear with me a second.
The keep mode person, Barry, is called John Owen. So you might see that name.
Okay, I'm just trying to let people in. Hold on. I don't know if I can let everybody in. Invite. Hold on, let's see.
People are appearing.
They are appearing.
Well, John Owen's got a box, so I assume that is John Owen, our John Owen, rather than somebody else.
Awesome. Can you see what it said there? Press Alt.
Yeah.
No, that's the microphone. That's to make sure you're unmuted. You need to press
Alt.
That's right.
The host muted everyone. The host has muted everyone.
Because you've not put your picture up.
Harry, can you unmute, please?
So if everybody who has joined could please turn off their cameras and please mute themselves. I'll introduce the meeting and explain to people what's going to happen. And then I'll ask you to turn on your camera if you want to speak. Otherwise, it becomes very hard to manage the meeting. So firstly, I hope you can all see me and I hope you can all hear me. It's very nice to see so many people have turned up. This is another time of doing a meeting like this. We've got representatives from West Estate, we've got representatives from Litchfields, and we've got the representatives from the building company as well. Pardon me, that name escapes me. What's going to happen is I'm going to allow the West Estate people and their associates 10 minutes to do a presentation and to make some general remarks, and then I will actually turn over to questions from everybody. So if you have joined, could you please mute yourself and could you please turn off your camera? What I will say on these things is this is a virtual meeting. We should, however, treat it just the same as a meeting if we were in person. I know people might be struggling with the technology or feeling it's hard to cope with the virtual meeting, but please do bear with us. Everybody is doing their best to make things work as well as possible. So this meeting, I say, is about the Green Cork site. It's about the planning for the proposed development. I've already sent the representatives some questions from people who are not here and from people who are here. And I'm going to hand over to Neil now. If you could unmute yourself, Neil, and we can begin the process for your presentation and your remarks. Neil, can you hear me?
I can, Barry. Can everyone hear me? Yeah. Fine, fantastic. First of all, I want to, not the usual way to start a presentation, but I want to formally apologise to Barry and also all the residents of Evercreech. We cancelled the last meeting at very short notice, and I appreciate that you'd already arranged to attend that meeting, and appreciate that caused some confusion. So if I just set out what's happened, just so you're aware of the situation. But again, I want to formally apologise to everyone on the call for that, cancelling that meeting. So just in terms of, I'm going to put a presentation up very shortly, but just to give you a little bit of background, we submitted a planning application on the site in what's outline, which is the sort of indicative details of the scheme rather than details of the scheme. That application was submitted, and the council accepted that application, but on further review of that application, following comments from including some residents, including yourself, the council decided that the application should have more details submitted to it. So they asked for all the details to be submitted, which included design of the houses, roads, drainage, the only asked for was landscape. So essentially we went away and did that process and worked up a revised scheme. That was submitted and that was going to be subject to the consultation event. That never happened because in between that period, Keepmoat came on board. You'll find out there's a representative from Keepmoat, John Owen, on the call who will provide a bit more detail about himself in a second. Sorry, I just saw the message ball. But essentially we submitted Keepmoat got involved, so we withdrew that. We withdrew the scheme and submitted a scheme which had Keepmoat input on, which dealt with Keepmoat house types to provide you more certainty of design, certainty of material, certainty of palette, certainty of look. So essentially the scheme in front of you is what we're discussing today. It's also the scheme which has been subject to input from Keepmoat, who are very keen to bring this site forward. Just as an aside, this scheme is for 120 units, which has 280 bedrooms in it. whereas the previous scheme, 166 units, had more bedrooms in it, 289. Essentially, the key difference to that being the current scheme where consulting it has smaller properties in it, so the number of bedrooms are less. Anyway, I'll just quickly put a presentation on, and I'll talk that through in a bit more detail now. Barry, I'm just going to share my screen if
That's fine. Neil, before you share, I did make one error in introduction, so pardon me, which is, as I'm sure you will all be aware, as you've seen when you enter, but the meeting is being recorded. You'll see it in the top left-hand side of your screen, a little button, a red flashing button with inside a cloud.
Yeah.
The meeting's being recorded so that residents or anybody else can watch it back if they desire. I've recorded these meetings previously. If you don't want to be part of the recording, please then don't have your camera on. But I just wanted to make it clear to everybody, the chaps from West Estate and their associates already know this, but this is what we've done with previous meetings. I felt it would be wrong if I didn't tell people it was recorded. Neil, I'm so sorry. I've also made you a co-host, so you should be able to share your screen.
Yeah, I'm going to put a presentation on now, which should, when I share, should start to appear, and I'll do that full screen.
Okay. If anybody is having any problems in seeing, please just put it in the chat and I will endeavour to help you.
So Barry, maybe a thumbs up if you can see that. Can everybody can you see that presentation?
I can certainly see it, and I'm going to mute myself now.
Great.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you, everyone. Half the battle is getting the technology to work. So just as a bit of an introduction, Barry's already introduced me. I'm Neil Westwick. I'm a senior director of Litchfield's a planning consultancy. I'm joined by John Owen, who's a land and partnership director at Keepmoat Homes, and John will speak in a second. I'm also joined by Craig Vanberdaff, who's on my screen in at the end of my screen, you might see him waving there, who is the architect behind the scheme. And also I'm joined by Jenny Mitter, an associate director at Litchfields. Ross Spenceley is due to join the call. He is just stuck travelling at the moment, but I'll introduce him when he turns up. So essentially, the presentation is going to be quite brief, but we'll look at an introduction to Keepmoat, because some of you won't know who Keepmoat Homes are. A brief canter through what the development plan shows now. A look at timescales, and then essentially I'll add some more on some of the points that have already been made on safety of the site and demolition. So I'm just going to scroll on to the next slide. John, I don't know if you're able to unmute yourself now and just do a little overview on Keepmoat just for the residents, and then I can take over and talk about the scheme.
Hello. Yeah. Hi, Neil. Thanks very much for that. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Great. Yeah. So hello, everybody, and thanks very much for having us this evening. Yeah. Most of you may not have heard of Keepmoat Homes, because we're relatively new house builder in terms of our presence in the southwest. We've been talking to West Estates for a few months on this site because we're really keen to develop new houses on it. And I suppose we've been brought in partly to demonstrate certainty over the ability to deliver the sites. Hence, Neil was talking about us providing them with our standard house types in order to be able to demonstrate that the houses will be delivered, and that there is a house builder, if you like, waiting to progress the site. But in terms of background of Keepmoat Homes, we are a top 10 national house builder, building over 4,000 homes a year. Great customer satisfaction results. We're a 5-star house builder with the Home Builders Federation Customer Satisfaction Survey, and that requires 90% of purchasers to be willing to recommend us to friends and relatives. In the southwest region, we opened up in 2018. We're predominantly kind of northern and Midlands-based house builder, but we opened up in the southwest in 2018. We've been really successful in buying and delivering sites down here. We're currently on site in quite a few different towns in the locality. So in Highbridge, we're delivering 123 factory-built homes just off the A38. We're delivering over 150 homes in the middle of Bridgewater. We are delivering 425 homes in Weston-super-Mare. That includes 64 net zero carbon homes. It's a completely gas-free development. There are 75 factory-built homes, and the kind of carbon emissions from those homes will be 80% less than the current building regs require. We're also building out in Bristol and Swindon at the moment. The Bristol site is a 350 home site, completely gas-free development in Hartcliffe in South Bristol. So we're really active. We're a growing region. We're really keen to get involved in the Evercreech site. And whilst we're not the planning applicant, we are here to deliver the site should it get a residential planning permission effectively.
Thanks, John. That's really helpful. And John's going to hang around on the call and hear any comments from residents. So,
yeah, I guess from my perspective, it'll be useful to hear what we haven't been on the planning journey as such. So it'll be useful to hear what the issues, concerns, and agendas are. Thanks.
So I've provided Barry a copy of this presentation, and I'm happy for it to be circulated afterwards. But just there's a series of detail points here. But what I'll do, I'll put the plan on screen. I'll talk the plan on these points, and then we can circulate the detail points after the meeting. But essentially, this is the revised layout on screen. Just as I explained before, the council, at the request of various objectors to the scheme and various consultees within the council, asked for more detail on the scheme. So essentially the scheme changed from an outline scheme to essentially a detailed scheme. The only matter which hasn't got full detail on is landscape. This scheme shows 120 units on the site. I think some of the key changes to the scheme, talking them through, is the retention of Kemp's Mill to the south of the site. So that'll be retained off Queen's Road. So essentially that's being retained. I don't know if you can see my cursor there, but I think you probably all know where Kemp's Mill is. Kemp's Mill will be retained on site, and and the intention of that is either for commercial or community uses. No use has been identified for the site, but we can come into that a little bit of detail later, and I'd welcome any views you might have. The creamery buildings are not being retained on site. Following further work looking at those buildings, they're not suitable for commercial uses and they are not suitable for conversion. Again, I know there's going to be questions on that, so we can provide some more detail on that later in this presentation. In terms of other changes, the number was reduced, as I said, from 129 to 120, very much focusing on smaller product, which is 1, 2 and 3 bedroom homes. The number of 4 bedroom homes has dropped to 7 units, with the predominant mix being 2 and 3 bedroom homes. So starter homes, starter family homes, focusing on more the affordable price point to get people on the housing ladder. Importantly, the public open space has increased to the back of the site, increasing in this area here to address concerns from the residents, council, sorry, and also in terms of Queen's Road. One of the major concerns there from local residents was the standoff distances, so everything's been removed. The houses along Queen's Road have been removed, and it's essentially there's been a much larger standoff at that end of the site. This area of the site has been taken over to a suds pond, which is an attenuation feature. This will be a dry suds pond and will only fill up at times of extreme storm events. So essentially that will capture water on site, the surface water, which is a requirement from the local authority. As a request for the parish council, the link through to the sports field has been removed from the site. So essentially that's been removed, and apartments have been added to the north of the site in this area here. The broad layout of the site and the road structure remains fairly constant, albeit there has been amendments with the curve of the road being slackened, and essentially with more green space and greenery in the site. As you see, the car parking is in line with the council standards of what's required, and then finally a new link is being put in here, connecting that existing site into Queen's Road. I know there's been concerns over in terms of local infrastructure, in terms of schools and doctors. And again, we can come on to that. I'm sure there's going to be a question on that. But essentially, we are still in discussion with the council of what level of contribution, what mitigation that might be required. Just turning on to the house types, Craig, do you want to just talk a little bit about the house types that we propose? Because these are very new. They weren't included in the first scheme that you saw.
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much. Yeah, I mean, it's obviously I'm a master planner, and I do a number of schemes throughout the country of varying scales. It's always a really nice architectural challenge when we have a site such as this. And you have a rich kind of vernacular. We've obviously got Kemp's Mill, some really interesting buildings to Queen's Road, and Priestley Road as well. And as I said, I think it's imperative, especially with Keep Moat coming on board, that we have a bespoke design response. Now, we're given a traditional house type palette, and it was really something which is essential that we have a response and a dwelling type which is distinctive. So it has the.
Yeah.
Sorry, is that okay there?
Can we still hear us? Sorry, there's just a bit of interference there.
You say they're ugly.
I think somebody has got their mic on, chaps. I will try and find who it is and remind people if they could just mute so that everybody else can actually hear the presentation. Thank you.
Right, I'm okay to continue there.
Yeah, you're absolutely fine to continue. Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you. Yeah, so again, it's for me, the challenge is to provide a development which is contextual, so it connects with the locality, with the rich heritage around, but it is distinctive. It's a development of sort of 2021. So again, we have all the thermal improvements. John from Keep Moat alluded to that in terms of the sustainable principles his company have, and it does adhere to the most current building regulation. But you can see from the sort of house type form, we have a combination of a variance of brick and some buff stone types, and then this kind of dogtooth brick surround, which is consistent with some of the properties on Queen's Road to the south. So its ability to have that distinction, but that connection. And again, we went for some variance. As I said, I think you would all know better than I the variance of buildings that exist around the site. And I think it's important, rather than one sort of generic brick type, one generic roof type, we still have that kind of variance and richness. They're still connected, but they still allow that vitality. Again, some details to the brick types. We've got the pan tile roof, we've got a slate effect roof type, and then chimney detailing used on terraces and terraces. So aside from the careful formation of the master plan, adhering to privacy, SUDS requirements, play space requirements, etc., the distinctive house type response is really essential, and hopefully you'll agree it comes back to what I say: distinction yet context. So that's it from a house type point of view.
Just very briefly, graded just the sections here.
Yeah, and I think this kind of embroiders a little bit of what I was saying about having the kind of the buff brick type, and then a 3-block terrace, again in a contrast red, chimney detailing either side, again that links to the sort of surrounding context, and then to the section BB on Queen's Road, to the bottom of that picture, you can start to see how we've got some gable features with chimney detailing, and then you've got kind of paired terraces in a 3-block terrace with, again, slate effect either side, and then that kind of orange pan tile effect with chimney detailing either side. Little bit of brick variance. So it's offering up that variance, that richness, which the site more than deserves.
Can I just one more slide? Then I appreciate, because I appreciate we're taking up a lot of time here. Kemp's Mill. There is no firm plans for Kemp's Mill. This is illustrative layout. This shows potential for Kemp's Mill. It is a very narrow, thin building. This plan shows adding some windows in the elevations of it, letting some light in to essentially form some flexible spaces inside that building. And by no means is that the final design. By no means are we saying windows will definitely go onto Queen's Road. It's just an indicative idea of what that building will become. But it is a very awkward building. It was built for a purpose, an industrial purpose. Converting it is possible. It's just the essentially the design of that and how that form and functions inside is quite difficult. And the windows are purely illustrative at this stage. I know I've had comments on overlooking on Queen's Road and whether there is a need for privacy glass on that side, or whether it's a need for less windows or a different approach. We're very much open to discussion on that. So just on timescales, obviously the formal application, revised formal application, as in the one you've got now, I bear in mind you have seen have been subject to a number of consultations, is in with the planners, and has the formal consultation period started. We are hopeful that we get a decision notice this year, and that will trigger a number of events. The key one being the site clearance. The idea that we would get the site clearance start this year, potentially very early next year, and running into spring, and then essentially an early start on site in 22, probably more likely spring summer 22, to essentially allow completion of houses. So the key activity will be taking place, demolition, which I know you'll a few questions have been raised on, but essentially happen winter or early part of the next year. So essentially, I think there's a lot of questions. I know we've already had some questions posed to us. I appreciate I've taken up far too much time at the moment. So I think I'll stop there if that's okay, and I'll answer questions. We'll pick up any more detail as part of your questions to us. Barry, is that okay if I hand back over to you?
That's fine. Yeah, that's absolutely fine. Thank you very much. I will also remove you from the spotlight so that everybody isn't looking at you. So hopefully that has happened. Can I check that people can actually see me? Because I'm over a couple of screens. Thank you. Thank you. That's good. So I've got some questions coming in the chat, and there's been some other questions before as well. The main question I think that most people are looking to talk about initially, I noticed you talked about the number of bedrooms going down, but the reality is the number of homes has gone up, and the density of the homes is a figure in its mid-40s in places of the development, whereas what's normal for a village and a conservation area is about 18, and the most modern housing development we have nearby, which is Horse Hill Meadows, is in its early 20s, 21, I believe. So do you want to comment in and around the development's proposed density and why it is at such an elevated level?
I think it's fair to say, in a broader planning context, it's in our view, it's not an elevated level. The government and the NPPF, which is the government's guidance, looks to maximise efficiency on sites. This product is bringing smaller homes to the site, which is identified need in their area and the surrounding area, which naturally pushes up density. Bedrooms in particular, and why I focused on that was a reduction in bedrooms, because bedrooms are generally, associated with 4-bedroom house can have up to 4 bedrooms with the cars associated with that, smaller properties, etc. So essentially, what we're seeing is less bedrooms, and whilst the number of units increases, bedroom numbers decrease, so the number of people on the site is likely to be actually less. But the point being is that this is a brownfield site. There is a need for this smaller product to let people on the housing market, and essentially we are directed to make most efficient use of that site. In terms of the village context, in terms of the densities, I think 18 is very low, and 22 is also very low as well. You're talking in the national planning policy guidance of the 30 to 40 range being more standard and typical for housing developments.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to go through the questions that are in the chat, but before that, there was also a question submitted to you guys earlier, which is about Kemps Mill, which you have touched on, which is to be retained, and it was also about privacy, but also you've indicated that Kemps Mill would be a community building. Do you want to give a little bit further detail on that? Does that mean the community would own that building, have to buy that building, lease the building? How is that envisaged as part of the plan?
Well, essentially the building has to be, the council are proposing that be retained. We haven't identified a use for that building yet in terms of total use, but we're more than happy to talk to the community, whether that be through yourself, Barry, or through the parish council, to talk about how that building and the nature and use of that building going forward. We don't have a use of the building. Like I said, it's quite an awkward space. So what that building becomes is an interesting matter. But no, we're more than happy to discuss with the relevant people in the community about that building and how that could be part of a community use on the site.
Right, but it would have to involve some financial transactions. What I'm trying to understand from yourselves is not that we're being the community's been gifted this building, there will be a financial transaction of some kind from your perspective.
I think that's for discussion, to be perfectly honest, with the community,
Okay.
in terms of whoever the relevant parties in the community are.
Okay, thank you. The next question is just about the entrances and exits from the site. Marion Covens has asked something about Queen's Road because the exit there is so narrow, and also you're proposing to move the main entrance of where the spay onto the road is today for the factory. The plan envisages moving that. Do you want to make some comments and explain the rationale? And also, would any calming traffic improvements be envisaged in that?
So just on Queen's Road, just to avoid any confusion, they are pedestrian and cycle accesses onto the site. There's no vehicular access off
Okay.
Queen's Road.
Didn't say that.
Roy, you're on screen. So that's for, and then on the main entrance in terms of the actual site and moving of that main entrance.
The main entrance, essentially the access point has been located in on the site, and that's been driven by the design of the housing layout.
Right. Okay. Thank you. And would there be any traffic improvements like mini roundabouts, etc., proposed with that, or as the actual traffic layout is not part of the plan?
2 seconds, I'll just defer to my colleague Jenny. Jenny, I don't want to give you the wrong answer here. Jenny, we're going through that with the council now, aren't we, in terms of any off-site mitigation?
I mean, it's just a simple T-junction arrangement, almost as it is now, although moved further up the road. So no roundabouts are proposed. As Neil says,
the traffic going to go?
Sorry, could I ask if you're not speaking, if you could please mute, because it's difficult for other people to hear. So we can't hear Jenny at the moment. So some people have unmuted themselves. If you could please remute, if that's okay, please. I will get you if you want to make a point. Thank you.
Yeah.
Sorry, Jenny.
Sorry. Yeah, so as Neil was saying, we are going to be discussing with the Highways Authority in terms of whether there is any further mitigation required on any of the junctions going into and out of the village, but that will have to come out in the consultation over the next few weeks.
Right, okay, thank you. There's a question which is in the chat again from Lynn Sargent, which is about the fact that it's prominently starter homes, so effectively I think 2 and 3 bed homes in the mix. The question being is, this looks unusual compared to other developments that have been done. Why does Evercreech seem to need 2 and 3 bed homes over large family homes?
It's a good question. It's usually the other question. It's usually the other angle I'm asked that, to be perfectly honest, in consultations. I'm usually asked why we're providing so many larger family homes and we should be 2 and 3 bedroom starter homes, is essentially the typical question I get asked. The reason for that is there is a need for that. It's placing them at a price point to let people get on the market, and there's a need for that across the area and across the wider region as well. So essentially we're focusing on that product, and Keepmoat are a builder which can deliver that product on the site. They've got experience of that, whereas some of the other multinational buildings would go for the larger family product.
Okay, there's another question here is about the net zero homes that you've talked about. What proportion of the homes are net zero, or is it all of the homes are net zero?
I think I'll just
yes,
say
John,
that the net zero reference was in relation to a site in Weston-super-Mare where North Somerset are funding the delivery of those net zero carbon homes. On this site, the homes will be, well, it's not yet defined fully, but the homes will be highly efficient in terms of their carbon use, and will certainly be at least 30% over and above the current building regs, which will mean a highly efficient fabric to the building, effectively combined with some kind of renewable energy, either a PV type of approach or perhaps air source heat pumps, to be defined basically. And that, but that is assuming no specific requirements in the Section 106 agreement, which I might leave you, Neil, to talk about whether there are local policy requirements around that.
Yes, and there are local policy requirements, but I think, John, your standards there would exceed that requirement.
Okay, if I go to the next question from Hillary, which does kind of lead us on from the 106 neatly, which is about impact on local services. Hillary particularly mentions the school, bearing in mind we have a primary school only. And also I think people would also look at doctor surgeries and so on. Have you got any plans in how they will be assisted or how the impact will be mitigated on those?
As part of any planning application, various bodies are consulted, whether that be for schools, the education body. For doctors, it usually goes to the PCT. We're trying to get feedback to the level of, for example, the generation of people that the development will deliver, and then whether we need to provide a contribution towards enhancement of those facilities. That might be enhancement of the primary school, it might be enhancement to a doctor's surgery, and essentially that will be led by the council. And that'll be done through the Section 106 negotiation.
Okay, I'm going to come back to facilities in a second, pardon me, but I just want to go through the questions around the chat, and then I've got a couple of more that have come in and I want to share with the participants. I think West have already had these as well. There's a very interesting question from Richard, which is, what's the price range of the homes proposed to be?
I'll probably defer to John, but I presume it's a little bit early, John, to say at the moment.
We really couldn't say at the moment. I mean, it won't be delivered for another year and a half before we'll be selling any houses there. So I think, you know, it will be defined by the local market conditions at the time.
Okay. Now I think probably the most pertinent question, which comes up the most often, and I've also ran a survey locally on this, and the number one thing that comes out about the site is the lack of commercial properties, premises or space on the site. In particular, the lack of shopping facilities, whether that's in a large supermarket or a mixture of shops and other units, retail units, shall we say. Could you elaborate as to why the site proposal is for 100% residential and there is no other amenity there in terms of property or employment?
Well, there is obviously the opportunity through Kemps Mill to have something other than residential on the site. I don't know if you're referring to indications from the Co-op. They reached out to essentially potentially locate on the site. An agreement couldn't be made with them in terms of their relationship to their unit with the residential and essentially their overall land take. So essentially we couldn't reach an agreement with the Co-op store as part of that proposal. Obviously Kemps Mill could be in that, and if we're hearing from the community that there's further commercials needed, obviously Kemps Mill could offer that function because it's not a residential unit. That's the key thing.
Okay, so just so I'm clear, because this is news to me as well. There was some negotiation with the Co-op, and the negotiation ceased or broke down.
Co-op didn't. Well, I haven't been contacted by Co-op directly. An agent from the Co-op contacted West Estates. Those discussions were at very early stage and then didn't progress.
And is there any discussion with any other retailer or supermarket operator at present, or have you now just reverted to 100%, excluding the Kemps Mill community use / any other use aspect? The rest is just for residential?
It is just residential, yes.
Okay, thank you. Cherry Lawson's reminded me, which was a question I'd received by email as well. It's in the chat. Why are there no garages in the actual development? It is one of the things that's in the build-in sort of strategy to reduce crime, is a recommendation for use of garages. And I must admit, I can't recall if in version 1 there were garages and they've been removed. Pardon me if they weren't. But the question now is, in this version, there definitely is no garages. Why is that, please?
Well, I think that, it comes down to the actual specific mix in terms of what we're being provided with, which is starter homes in terms of affordability, smaller units, said number of 2-bedroom units and 3, but that generally means car ownership is lower in that regard. And as I said, the we do satisfy parking standards within the scheme. And as I said, it's just, as I said, if you're talking about larger properties, yes, that would warrant a garage, but because of the scale of homes, the type of homes, there aren't obviously any garages there.
Okay, thank you. The question is also about, you illustrated property types and we saw some nice looking chimneys. Are these chimneys real or are they kind of staged dressage, shall we say?
I would say that they would probably stay, my understanding is staged there. They will be brick clad, but yes, it'll generally be a GRP skirt. The reason for that is actually...
Do you want to explain to the non-technical people what a GRP
yes, sorry,
is?
that's incredibly...
I know what a GRP is, but I have to sit through lots of planning.
Incredibly presumptuous of me, isn't it? It's yes, so you have a chimney, and usually if you have a traditional chimney, it is load bearing all the way through. What we have is a traditional brick, and then a timber truss, and then we place a glass reinforced plastic skirt, and then we essentially stick the brick slips around that, so it's imperceptible from what a normal functioning chimney is. Now, the reason it's not a cheap out or some sort of fop to it, the reason we don't have that is the fabric first approach to which building regulations is currently changing is that we need to provide as tight a fabric as possible. So the idea of not having chimneys or working fires, we wouldn't be allowed to achieve building regulations with them. So it's an aesthetic choice, absolutely, but I do need to say that they're constructed in this GRP skirt fashion.
Thank you. Do you want to go through, because there's concern about asbestos on the site, and what are the plans for the removal of the asbestos, either before building was to take place, if planning permission was to be granted, or between now and the planning process ending?
So I'll confirm there is asbestos on the site. The buildings are an age where there will be asbestos on the site. Essentially, the buildings, we're looking to demolish the buildings on site once planning permission is hopefully granted on the site. And essentially, that will be demolished under normal regulations using the health and safety guidelines. So essentially, asbestos will be dealt with in a very strict manner by a registered contractor dealing with that strip out. That asbestos strip out is extremely expensive, and it'll be dealt with in a professional manner, dealing with all the relevant health and safety procedures and liaising with the council's health and safety team and getting all the necessary certificates from the various bodies. But rest assured, the asbestos from the site will be removed in a safe and controlled manner, in line with all national and local requirements, in line with the building control team as well.
Okay, thank you for that. What are the plans managing the security around the site now and during any proposed build process? We have had issues in security on the site, and they continue to exist today. People are very concerned about this.
They do, and it's incredibly disappointing actually, because the site has been broken into on countless occasions, and there's been quite a significant amount of theft on the site and vandalism, and most recently arson on the site, which is an incredibly disappointing thing to happen on the site. The site is essentially re-secured. We're in discussions with the police about adding further physical security measures around the site, but obviously people are breaking the site and causing trouble. Various people have been recently. Somebody was stopped by the police for removing furniture from the site, etc. So essentially, we want to resolve this planning situation as quickly as possible and get these buildings demolished. It will be the quickest solution to this problem. And I only apologise for the last incident the weekend where the fire authority was caused, but we're in discussions with the fire authority and also the police to see what else we can do to secure the site. But every time we secure the site, people come in with bolt cutters, wire cutters, kick doors down, etc. And it's a very difficult thing to manage.
Okay, thank you. I mean, you referred there about security, and you referred there to the weekend at the incident at the weekend. One of the very concerning things, and was also something the various responder services were concerned about, so the fire and the police, is there is a number of a telephone number for a security firm on the hoardings, on the signs on site. And on Saturday, none of those telephone numbers were answered. So going forward, will there be a proper security arrangement in place with a number that will be answered for residents and for emergency services?
Yeah, I'll have to look into that. I don't know why that was the case, but yes, certainly will be.
I mean, the police and the fire people did try for about half an hour and got no reply from anybody.
No, and I've been in discussion with the police and fire service, and they have my details now as well, so they can call that if anything else does take place, and we'll be looking to add some more physical security around the site to essentially try and prevent people from breaking in to the property again.
So does that mean that for any incident on the sites, we should be speaking to Litchfields and not the owner then? Well,
no. We've got Ross, and we can circulate details, but of course you can. I'm saying you can contact me if you need to. I'm just saying if there's but I'm intending that those stickers on the board will either be we'll find out why no phone numbers weren't answered, or they'll be replaced with appropriate numbers on them. Okay, thank you. I'm just looking. I don't have any more questions here now, but if somebody has a question, please use the raised hand facility, and I can turn your camera on, or you can turn your camera on, and I'll make sure that you can be heard. Because I'm sure it would be much better if everybody hears someone else's voice other than mine, even though they are all the questions that have been submitted to me. Has anybody got a question? Has anybody, for example, from the parish council who's in attendance want to ask a question? Bethan, I'm going to ask you to unmute and ask you to turn on your camera. There we go. So Beth and Stanley, there you go. Over to you. We can hear you live and loud.
Thank you. Hi, I was just going to ask if the idea is we would like to ideally try and resolve this quickly, which I can understand that everybody wants to do. Is there any reason why each time they resubmit the plans, they hardly change? They don't take any account of the comments which are repeatedly put, that the buildings are too closely put together, that they haven't really addressed any of the infrastructure concerns. They haven't addressed really the co-op. You know, these things keep going round and round, and that's why we don't seem to be making any progress.
Thanks, Beth, and a very, very good question. Neil, would you or somebody from the team care to respond?
Yeah, unfortunately, I'd have to disagree on that. There's been some quite major changes to the scheme. Kemp's Mill's been retained, the properties have been pulled back, detail has been provided the nature of the scheme, Suds ponds have been added, public open space has been increased. As I said, discussions with the co-op didn't progress, despite having some discussions with them early on. So we have made change to the scheme. Obviously, there is a cost for remediating the scheme, bringing the buildings down, remediating the land underneath there, which given this previous industrial use, will need remediation. So essentially what we're designed is we consider a well-designed scheme meeting the needs of.
But you might consider that, but nobody, very, very, very many people disagree with you. So you're not listening to the feedback. It's not that people don't want things to be built, but they don't agree that what you're doing is sympathetic to the village. What people want is something that's measured and reasonable and long term. And you're just trying to cram in as many buildings as you can. And despite what you might say, that is what everybody feels, and you're not taking account of that.
So in terms of your view, what would you like to see on the site?
I absolutely agree. We want housing, but we want it to be sympathetic and spaced out, and not. If you look at it in terms of the appearance, in terms of how spaced out the rest of the village is, I think everybody is realistic that you're not going to get exactly what is around, but the density is huge, and the amount of habitation that you want to bring in there is not suitable for the village hub that we have. I think everybody wants housing, and they want people to be able to stay here and it to be affordable, but this is not a sympathetic scheme.
Okay, thanks, Beth, and I think they're very good comments. And I'll ask Neil, do you want to come back and address that specifically? I mean, the biggest comment is around the density, and I don't think people accept what you said about the National Planning Policy Framework. And I know from looking at other schemes up and down in the Mendip district area, 40 is simply not a density that will be used in this setting because of all the pressures it will bring. So the question seems to be repeatedly and regularly, because I think what is unusual here is you have a site where everybody in this meeting tonight accepts some change and development should take place. People, I think, are, speaking honestly, split whether there should still be an employment use or not on the site. But I think the vast majority of people think there should be an employment use through the form of extra shops and some work live spaces for people. But that's just my observation. But the question that keeps coming back is, you know, we had a submission initially at a 129, if I remember right, homes. It went down to 106, and then it's definitely unique in planning in terms of listening to residents. I would use a term, you've improved it worse by going from 106 back to 120. And you can argue what you would like about the number of beds and the configuration of the units, but quite simply, the number of doors in that estate will mean an extra number of 2+ cars per unit. So there's a whole knock on which you would know. And even to move the entrance just to fit in more homes seems to be, that's the driver from what people are saying. That's the comment and a question to you, is it seems to be quite inflexible to reply.
No, I think I'd sort of disagree on that. Obviously, in terms of number of bedrooms, that is a key metric in terms of number of people on the site. Less number of bedrooms, less people as a general rule. Starter homes, usually a young family, whereas a larger 4-bedroom house, a family with more children generally, as a general rule. Obviously, this is all generalities here. In terms of the density, it's a brownfield site. I'll reiterate it. We are delivering something which is a scheme which we think is appropriate. We've incorporated that in design, and that is essentially a density which we think is appropriate for this setting and is appropriate in line with what the government and also the council's own aspirations in terms of delivering housing to meet their needs is requiring us to do.
Yeah, and I would mirror what Neil's comments. I mean, from the many developments that we have, the density is absolutely proportionate. And I would also say mirror what he said. This is almost quite strange. It's an inverse argument almost, because the consultations we have are always, why haven't we got smaller starter homes? How are people meant to get on the housing ladder, etc., etc. And it's just with having larger detached dwellings. This is something we have. The specific mix is to allow people at the smaller end of the market. So yeah, the density is something proportionate to which I design. I do reiterate the changes. I understand what you're saying about dwelling numbers. However, if you look at the changes to the inclusion of suds ponds, the coming back of the southern boundary retentions, Kemp's Mill, there have been a lot of substantive changes. However, I do understand what you're saying about dwelling numbers, but I think that skews the argument slightly.
Okay, thank you. Marion, over to you. You are muted. You'll have to unmute yourselves. Marion Coffins, please.
I think I heard you say earlier, correct me if I'm wrong, that site clearance would take place after you'd obtained planning permission. Is there no possibility whatsoever it can take place beforehand? Presumably you own the site. So is there any reason why you're not clearing the site right now?
Essentially, we want to find an end use for the site. At the minute, we don't know where saying we keep Kemp's Mill. There are discussions, and there's been comments from other residents which should say we should keep the creamery. We're of the view that the creamery shouldn't be retained because it's only a shell. There's nothing in that building. Essentially, that building is being converted entirely for the previous industrial use. The council accept that it's not associated with B2, B8. So we haven't got any certainty at the minute what on the site needs to be retained or not. We are, we understand Kemp's Mill and we've accepted that, but what's happening with the creamery? So unfortunately, it's a little bit early. If we had more certainty to move forward, the developer, West Estates, can move quickly with demolition. They own a demolition company, but they need some certainty of what the delivery of the site will be.
I think there are a lot of other buildings on that site, besides Kemp's Mill and besides the creamery, that you could address.
I think it probably just goes back to we just need some certainty of direction of travel and something which I need to, and I'll raise this point with West Estates. Unfortunately, I don't think Ross has been able to make the call, but I'll raise this point with West Estates because I appreciate the site is an eyesore within the village, but we do need some certainty in some direction that travel we're going.
I mean, Neil, to follow up on what Marion is saying, I think that the point is well made. We had a fire at the weekend in a building which nobody would expect to be retained, which is a prefabricated building. And there are a number of buildings still there which nobody expects to be retained. Roy Williams is in the meeting, who used to work at Green Corps. He could tell me what each and every building and each and every square inch of the factory was used for, and he might make a comment in a second. But as a general observation, there seems to be very little money, or the most de minimis amount, being spent on actually addressing the site and making the site A, easier to manage, and B, less of an eyesore. And I think, if I was to speak for everyone, and I think what Marion is trying to say, Marion, correct me if I'm wrong, is that the village would prefer the buildings that are going to be redundant to be removed sooner rather than later, because there is stories of people with rough sleepers in there, there are stories with other activities in there, and we've already had the mishap which required, 5 fire crews and 3 hours of various people's time who aren't even responder services, myself included, people who are in the parish council, people who are residents, publicans, etc. at the weekend, and we cannot go through that again as a village. And there needs to be some proper financial commitment, which will eat into West Estate's margin. But really, I think what Marion is saying is correct. Marion, I hope I'm not putting words in your mouth.
No, just to go back on that one. When West Estates originally bought the site, they put in an application for demolition, which the council refused or turned down on the basis that they want certainty over the end product on the site. So essentially, that application was submitted, and the council basically requested that they, because of the nature and relationship of the site, the conservation area, that they had a end product there. So essentially, at the very start of this process, West Estates did try to put a demolition application in, but like I said, I think ultimately was withdrawn by West Estates on the basis that the council indicated refusal.
Okay, I'm going to move on because of time. Sorry, Marion, I was going to move on, but go ahead if you wanted to say something else, please. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Marion.
I was just going to ask, which council was that?
It was Mendy.
My point is, sorry, Neil, but my point is, as landowners, as the owners of the land, you have a responsibility to keep it safe, to keep it looking tidy. And I understand the sound bites that are coming out from you about development and whatever, but at the end of the day, it needs to be made safe. Keep the creamery if you're not sure about what's going to happen there, and keep the Kemp's Mill if you're not sure about what's going to happen there. But I can't imagine either the PC, sorry, Barry, you may call me wrong, I can't imagine the PC or Mendip District Council are going to oppose you flattening that land.
I understand the point, Marion, and I think you've made it. I'll take it back to West Estates and we'll take that back to them. So, but I understand what you're saying.
Okay, I'm going to move on, Marion. It's not to diminish from what you're saying. I think the guys from Litchfields, pardon me, are going to take that away as an action point. I think it's an important action point. I would ask you to please come back to me in a timely manner. David and Jill, I'll come to you in a second. I see you want to raise a point. I'm just going to come to Tracy Burr first, and then I will come to you, David and Jill Lindsay. Tracy, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we cannot see you, but we can hear you. You can put your camera on or not. It's up to you. It's up to you. It's absolutely fine. Over to you.
Definitely my best view without the camera. I live opposite the factory. I have done for 25 years. And personally, I do welcome the development for housing. One of my concerns and my neighbour's concern, who can't be on the call today, is the moving of the entrance. Yeah, I speak as somebody who watched a lorry come in and out at Christmas every 5 minutes. The traffic is probably less than it will be now if it's developed. But in moving the entrance and making it a T-junction, different legislation applies, and some of us have not got parking on this road. So is provision going to be made for those on Prestley Road opposite this entrance to have some parking within the development?
It's a very, very good point. Why don't we take that, Tracy, rather than taking any more time on this call, why don't we take this offline? Barry, or I can provide my email address and we'll have a separate discussion on that with yourself and your neighbour without the I'm not trying to, I'm happy to do it publicly, but I just think we have a separate chat on that, and we can see what we can achieve.
Okay, yes, that's fine. If Barry passes it on, myself and my neighbour and all of us affected on this bit, as I live directly opposite the entrance, would be more than happy to have a conversation So yes, that would be good. Thank you.
Yeah, if you do that, I'm not trying to take away from the public meeting, but I just thought, just bearing in mind time.
No, but it's a very personal issue
Yeah.
from that point of view. So I'm absolutely fine with that.
Okay,
That's fine.
thanks, Tracy. Thank you, Neil. I'm going to move us on. David and Jill. David, I see you leaning forward. I don't know if that means you're going to speak or if Jill is going to speak, but over to you.
It's me who's going to speak, David. We've been told that security is going to be increased and made more efficient. However, people will still get into the site. That is a recognised thing. Whatever security they do, some people will find a way to get in. How near is there going to be a key if somebody who has got in illegally falls, breaks a leg, the fire brigade couldn't get in? How is an ambulance crew going to get into the site unless there is a key and adequate key holders in the village?
No, it's a good point. Like I said, we're discussing that with the police now, and once we come to a resolution that we will update Barry and yourselves in the village.
Okay, David, any other comment? Any follow-up?
It needs to be sooner rather than later because the site's very insecure now and somebody is going to fall and be seriously injured and will need to be got out urgently. Talking about minutes, not the 3 hours that people wasted trying to contact anybody in charge.
No, understood the point, and obviously it is disappointing that people are breaking into the site, but understand the point.
I've got a question I wanted to follow up on, which the builder Keymote you mentioned, and when they were introduced at the start of them. Sorry, David, were you okay with that? Was that all you needed? I'm sorry, I've carried on. David, is that all right?
That's all we can do for now.
Okay, sorry, I should have come back to you. I do apologise.
Thank you.
No problem. My question about Keymote, and you talked about their involvement and it being subject to planning permission being granted and all these plans that we see here today. If planning permission is refused on this application, one has got to ask what happens and what happens to the relationship between yourselves and Keymote. Do they just end up walking away?
Obviously can't speak for John, but John's a house builder, so he will only Keymote will only bring forward a scheme for housing. So essentially, if there is no permission for housing, they've got nothing to deliver.
So is it like one of these sort of no win, no fee sort of scenarios?
Well, it's different though. Keymote are buying it off West Estate. So essentially, if there's no planning permission, there isn't a scheme. But essentially, West Estate will likely appeal and essentially we'll have to look for another developer, or Keymote will stay on for that journey. I don't know, to be perfectly honest, Barry. And essentially, Keymote ourselves are looking to bring forward a scheme. We want to get it approved locally. We've gone some distance to meet residents' concerns, and just hearing some more now. So we'll take them away after this call.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Neil. Thank you. I'm conscious we have hit 7:04. In the terms of public meetings, it is not a very long time. In the terms of people's personal time, it is a long time. I'm going to ask, has anybody else got any questions? If you want to raise your hand now, please, it would be a good time.
Unmute me.
Roy, I can hear you. You obviously want to talk. So off you go. Roy Williams, who used to work at Green Corner, is one of our parish councillors. Roy, we can hear you.
Yeah, Neil, thank you for your presentation. One or two things to me that are new, and I'm not going to go into that because we have a parish council meeting next week, which we will put forward our views.
Yep.
I don't think you've done enough, to be honest. I think the village feels, and I think I speak for the village, it's far too many houses. And until you address that situation, I don't think you're going to get the support of the village. I may be wrong, but everybody I speak to, and I do speak to a lot of people throughout the village, bring the numbers down, please, Neil. And for me, personally, the Bats Farm, the Oakwee Creamery building, for me, has not been satisfactorily answered. I still think that building is viable for building. I may be wrong, but my view is that that is a good stone building. And I just find it, and I think people in the village will be really disappointed to see the bulldozers go in and flatten all those buildings. But my view is too many houses now. I think you need to address it, but that's only my view. But speaking to a lot of people in the village, I've been on parish for many, many years, and it's the thing that's the stumbling block in my view. Thank you for listening.
No, thank you very much, Roy. It's very clear, and that message and is very clear. I think what if you mind me, Barry, for 2 seconds. What I'm hearing is Roy made that point about the number of houses. I've also heard the bit about parking with a new entranceway, which I think we'll address offline. I think I'm hearing support for retention of Kemp's Mill. I think I'm hearing that. There is a question mark over the creamery, of which we've got some differing views on. But the principle of residential development on the site is something which people aren't disagreeing with. It's just the quantum of units.
I think the principle that people are most in agreement is the principle of a mixed use site, which includes residential and either employment or commercial or a combination thereof. I think, and if anybody disagrees with me, I don't think anybody expects it just to stay as a factory site as it is today. And I think the other thing that I think most people would agree with is the buildings that will be redundant, the villagers would be happier that the demolition of them would happen earlier, so that at least there is less opportunity for rough sleeping, less opportunity for crime, less opportunity for fire and hazard. Just for clarity for everybody, Roy is one of the parish councillors, and as he said, the parish council as a body will discuss it. I don't speak for the parish council, and he doesn't speak for the parish council. The parish council does its business at meetings, and the next meeting of the parish council is on Tuesday, which anybody who's at this virtual meeting is more than welcome to go to, given COVID restrictions. However, if we had everybody who was here, which is about 90 people in total, then we would be in breach of them. But, you know, I don't expect 90 people would turn up to a physical meeting. As Roy has said, the parish council will come to its deliberation there on next Tuesday. And Roy speaking as somebody who's been a councillor but not speaking for the council. I think, is that fair, Roy? I don't want to put you on the spot.
Definitely, Baron. It's just my thoughts entirely. My thought. I'm not speaking on behalf of the parish. It's just my view that there is one stumbling block, and I think I've made that stumbling block the main issue.
Yeah, very clear, Roy.
That's very clear. Just one sort of just for clarity myself going away. I think Barry, you articulated, and maybe other residents' views of the idea of this being mixed and commercial. I think that's where the confusion in my head lies from the conversations, and essentially that if you want to say, if you're telling me, or the residents are telling me that this wants to be a mixed commercial site, obviously we've got Kemp's Mill. Are we saying that other buildings should be commercial on the site? So does that mean that then you're asking me that buildings should be demolished straight away? So essentially, are we saying retention of office blocks? I'm just trying to see I'm just trying to understand what exactly that commercial element the village is envisaging on that site being, and do they envisage that being retention of some of the commercial properties on the site, which then causes us some difficulties in sort of looking at what the final solution is?
Well, and Bethan's got a question. I'll come back to her in a second, but to come back as you've kind of thrown us up. I mean, this is a public concerns meeting by me as a local councillor. I think if you held a public consultation, and if you actually had surveyed and contacted people by post with some options and presented various models that people could pick and choose between, then you'd have a much better idea of the blend and what would be appropriate. So as the owner or as the owner's representatives, that's down to yourselves to do. This is not a public consultation meeting. This is a meeting about our concerns by me, the local councillor. And I think you've highlighted one of the other failings that people feel, even though I've hosted this meeting again tonight, people feel that the developer or the owner isn't actually consulting and making enough effort to outreach into this community. So I'll leave that there as a statement. You don't need to reply to it, Neil. I know your views, but I just want to make that very clear. I'll give you a right of reply if you want, but I'm also conscious Bethan wants to ask a question. So can I hand over to Bethan, or do you wish to come back on that? But I
No, it's fine,
have
Barry.
an argument.
No, not here to have an argument. Just hand over to Bethan to.
No problem. Thank you,
I would
Bethan. Back to you.
It wasn't actually, it was really following on very much from what you were saying, Barry, which is what I was going to say is I'm going to ask the question as an individual, but as to lots of people that I talk to in the village, will there be an undertaking following this consultation to have something that is more considered, is not just a rehash of exactly what we've had the last two times? And I take their point that they've made small amendments, but they have not addressed the particular things which have been repeatedly raised by a number of people on this call and in the village, which is the density and the unsuitability, and people are not happy with it. I think everybody agrees something needs to be done, but this is not suitable, and just resubmitting things with tiny changes and not considering the village is what is causing the stumbling block. And I don't see how many different ways we can keep saying this.
I think point understood. I think we have to go in and take stock, and then we'll come back either through yourselves, the parish council, or through the council themselves.
Thank you.
Okay. This is my last call for questions. If anybody has a question or an issue they feel has not been covered, please let me know now, either by putting it in the chat or by raising your hand, and I will make sure you're accommodated. Marion, I see you're here. I'm going to come to you in 1 second because you've had a bit before, but I certainly will come back to you. I just want to make sure there's nobody else. I'm just looking through the screens. Right, Marion, I'm going to unmute or ask you to unmute and ask you to turn on your video, and off you go. We can see you now.
Well, hello. It's a comment rather than a question. Sure. When Neil was saying about the uncertainty of what commercial buildings to take, I think I'm right in saying, having spoken to quite a few people, that the village would like to see purpose-built workshops for local businesses on the site, together with a lesser amount of housing. That is my view. I think it's shared by quite a few. Thanks, Marion. I think you speak exactly correctly there, that there should be, and I see people's thumbs going up in terms of what you've said. I think that's really, really important. And Neil, I'm pleased to hear, that you're taking away some takeouts from this meeting. This is, it is our concerns meeting, and I'm glad you have. I've received a question which I will ask, and you won't like me asking it, but I will ask. And the question I was asked was, how many times have yourselves visited the village now since the original application was put in, and when were you last on the site?
Well, I think the first question is obviously the application has been submitted. I was last on the site a little while ago. COVID restrictions being one of the main stumbling blocks. With I obviously don't live in Evercreech or the Mendip area, so a hotel accommodation is necessary whenever I travel down. So I think, unfortunately, it's been an unusual period of time, and I respect most people on this call has stayed fairly local over the last 18 months. In terms of
you've got colleagues who are in Bristol. To be fair, I hear that you don't have a Bristol accent, but Lichfields is a national firm.
Oh, no. I think and we are due to visit the site very shortly with the council. I've personally been to the site probably around about, I would say, 12, maybe 11, 12 times. I can look at my diary when I've been on site. But Ross has been on site a number of times. Jenny has been on site a number of times, and so has the architect. But yes, we haven't been in the last 6 months, and certainly as a result of unfortunately as a result of COVID restrictions and travelling, it's been a bit more difficult.
Has anybody visited the site since the fire, specifically since the fire at the weekend? Has anybody representing West Estates, or has anybody who works for Lichfields been on the site or at the site in attendance? So
I don't know if West Estates, but I can find out, Barry, and I'll come back to you on that. I expect a representative probably has visited the site. And in terms of Lichfields, no. But like I said, there's going to be a site visit coming up shortly with the council as well on the site, which will be...
That's with the council planning officers, just for clarity to people. That is
yes.
With Anna Clark and with the heritage officer. Just want to be clear for people who, I mean, you will know Neil, who's never. I just trying to make it clear to them.
But I think likewise, it's the first time the council themselves have visited the site as well. So the council officers themselves have visited the site. So it's a key opportunity to walk them around the site as well.
Okay, splendid. Okay, any questions for anybody else? Otherwise, I will begin to close the meeting up. I'm just checking for any hands raised. If you feel that we've not covered something, please feel free to email me. If you don't have my email, you can find it very easily in this village.
Might be helpful if you actually learned how to use it.
Well, they keep on telling me to do something, and that.
Richard, we can hear you. If you do want to get in touch via me, and if you don't want to ask in this public forum, that's fine. I will absolutely pass your concerns on. There's a number of people who have emailed me, and I've gone on to Neil and Jenny, who are obviously the acting on behalf of our representatives of West Estates. They don't work for West Estates, so I do thank them that it's not their direct employer, and they have come back to me with a number of answers which I'll cascade to people. Neil, do you or Craig or Jenny want to add anything finally? I'd like to give you a
No, I'd just like to thank you. I'd just like to thank you very much for your time, everybody's time on the call. Appreciate you all giving up your time to be in this call. So thank you. I think I've got some messages, some take-home points to take away from that. And just to remind you, the residents on Priestley Road, I just want to reiterate the offer to meet separately with them, discuss that.
Presley, you must learn how to say the local road names. Presley.
Sorry, it's my Geordie accent. Apologies. If
I as a Paddy can get it right, I'm sure you can too.
I think it sounds better, Barry. I think it's posher.
You would say that, Tracy. You would say that. Okay, everybody, I am going to now end the meeting. Thank you, everybody, for putting up with me as a very bad anchor person. And I will ensure if anybody's contacting me with questions, they are forwarded, and if I get answers, they will be answered back. The meeting's been recorded, so if anybody wants to watch it back, I'll make it available on my councillor site. I'm very grateful to Neil, to Carl, Craig, and to Jenny for joining. I don't think we got Ross in at all finally, which is unfortunate. Come back to me. Also, reminder, you can like or comment on something on social media, but if you want to give proper feedback, you need to do it on the Mendip website so the Mendip Council planners can see what you think. Or, of course, you can contact Litchfields or West Estates if you wish as well. But please make sure you do give your feedback on the development, because without doing so, they don't know what to do and it can't be improved. So thank you, everybody. I will leave you for the evening. And I would say enjoy the weather, but it's clouded over now. So thank you very much and have a great evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thanks.
Thank you.